Welcome to your astrological forecast for the week of Monday, October 28th through Sunday, November 3rd, 2024. Honestly, I can't believe it's November already. I just did my November calendar for, the astrology, the transits and whatnot. So definitely a lot of interesting stuff to talk about for November, and we've got some things to cover for this week as well, of course. Moon will be transiting from Virgo through Sagittarius this week, so it's going to run through these fall signs of Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius. So it's kind of reinforcing these fall vibes that we've had going on lately. We talked in the last week about how Sun just recently joined Mercury in Scorpio, so that means that we're plunging into this next phase of fall in the northern hemisphere. I know many areas are still experiencing very high temperatures, but depending on where you're at, many of us are also experiencing, the colder temperatures that are more common this time of year. And those very much kind of run side by side with Scorpio season. As it gets colder, it kind of heightens your senses. We become more mentally aware, but also more kind of emotionally aware as well. I think really fall in general as a season is kind of the most intellectual season. If you look at all the fall signs, Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius, they're all very kind of analytical and very sort of intellectual, conversational. Fall is not just intellectual, it's also a season that kind of focuses on relationships. There's also a lot of like fashion and things like that I think are kind of at their peak this time of year. So that's kind of what we're experiencing in general. I also mentioned last week how, with Sun and Mercury now in Scorpio, there's a lot of water planets. That will change this week. So, as we start out the week, you can see here, this is the chart for Monday, October 28th. We start out with, of course, Saturn and Neptune are in Pisces, as they both have been since early last year. Mars is in Cancer, Sun and Mercury in Scorpio. So a lot of water energy. That will continue through Halloween, just in case you were wondering, which I think is kind of fitting in a way. I'll talk more about that later. But yeah, I mean, I think it's fitting because I don't know. Halloween just seems like a water sign event to me. It's very fitting with Scorpio, since Scorpio is kind of a darker sign, has to do with creepy things and also like disguises or mysteries. So that very much all kind of falls in line. So I think it's gonna be very fitting having these water energies. The water signs have the most to do, not just with emotion, but with like mysteries or complexities, things like that as well. Other kind of bullet points this week, we have 2 planets changing signs. Also, daylight savings time ends as well in the United States. So let's go through it. Let's cover some charts here. So this is the chart for Monday, October 28th. I already kind of talked about that. We start out with a lot of water theme, a lot of water in general. Venus is, of course, still in Sagittarius. So that shows that we are a little bit, vibrant and expressive. That is a really warm energy, I think. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, so it naturally has to do with expansion and kind of adventure. So putting Venus there, it just means that we might be a little bit more adventurous with our desires and our pleasures. So that's a good time, generally speaking. We're also starting out the week with Moon in Virgo. So as a whole, despite Venus and Sagittarius, in general, this is a pretty heavy chart, really. And I think this is a bit unusual. Really, for much of this year, we've actually had a lot of yang energy, a lot of, fire and air transits. So that's very different as we start out this week. We already talked about the heavy water kind of focus. And then there's 3 main bodies in Earth signs: Pluto, Uranus, and the Moon. So combining Sun and Mercury in Scorpio with Moon in Virgo, very analytical, very attentive to details. This could be a great time for organizing or, getting rid of things. Both Virgo and Scorpio are all about refining. They're all about, simplifying and making things more efficient and things like that. So might be a great day for some spring cleaning, fall cleaning. I don't know. Let's go forward to Friday, November 1st. So this is probably the biggest event of this week. We get a new moon in Scorpio. This is the only Scorpio new moon for this year. So, often it's said that, there are 2 beginnings to each kind of astrological season. There's the time when the sun enters a sign, and then there's a second kind of beginning when we get that new moon in that sign. So this is, you can kind of think of it as a second beginning of Scorpio season. This new moon will occur at 9 degrees Scorpio. And what I like about this is that it doesn't aspect a whole lot. There's only one kind of major aspect that I found, and that would be a trine to Saturn in Pisces, which is retrograde, by the way. So typically when you have a new moon or any planet or aspect, typically when you involve Saturn, it tends to be very challenging and heavy, and you have to be wise about managing your resources. It can typically feel depressed or kind of boring. It's just such a heavy energy. But this is like Saturn's really on light mode here, though. Not only is Saturn in Pisces, which I think is the easiest Saturn sign. Saturn is always challenging, but it's about as easy as Saturn gets in Pisces, because Pisces is such like a fluffy kind of hippie energy. Putting Saturn there, especially Saturn retrograde like it is now, Saturn is about as soft as it gets, right? Saturn is affecting us in a more kind of, much less direct than it usually is, literally. It's more affecting kind of our subconscious and things like that. And then plus you have to take into account the nature of the aspect. This is a trine. So considering it is an aspect to Saturn, this is as easy of an aspect as you could possibly ask for. So it just depends on which way you look at it. Yes, this new moon does aspect Saturn, so on some level we may have to get realistic. But keep in mind as well, this is a very watery phenomenon. The new moon is in Scorpio, which is of course a water sign, and then trining Saturn and Pisces, which is also water. So we are having to get real and realistic, but it's more in kind of an emotional or non-physical way. So again, it's not as concrete as, like it could have to do with finances or other resources, but it may just have to be with, being wise or being like managing our emotional resources, things like that. You know what I mean? So it gets almost kind of tricky to even talk about because it's not as easily quantifiable. The water themes are more non-physical in nature. But yeah, depending on where your placements are, this is a new beginning. I always say new moons, not always, but they tend to be the least active time of the lunar cycle. It's not nearly as intense as a full moon. Generally speaking, the more light the moon has, the more intense and active things tend to be. So, the new moon, the moon has no light. It doesn't appear, it's not visible really at all because it's so close to the sun. So, this is more a time of kind of reflecting, maybe. It's a time of kind of coming up with new intentions, new ideas for the next kind of lunar month. This new moon coincides with the first of the month, so this would be an extra great time for, thinking about, what do I want for November? What do I want to transpire for this, not just the calendar month, but the lunar cycle as well, the next, 4 weeks, what have you. One last thing about that, because the new moon is in Scorpio is a sign that I think has a lot on its plate. The main themes that I have kind of observed that, not just myself, but, the main themes that are associated with Scorpio are kind of emotional intimacy. During Scorpio season, we have to take into account of, who can we trust, who can we collaborate with, who can we, especially during times that are a little bit more intense or critical situations, who does it actually, benefit us to work with, to collaborate with, how can we be kind of service to others or cooperate with others, and how can they cooperate with us? It's kind of like Libra season, but more intense in a way. So that's where, it is very emotional, but it can also be about, finances as well. Scorpio has a lot to do with like investing. That's a huge keyword. Investing, your emotional resources, investing financially, and especially with that aspect to Saturn, which has to do with managing resources as well. That's the general area, or those are the general areas where we might be kind of revisiting our intentions for this month. I hope that makes sense. Of course, this will depend, on an individual level. It depends, where does 9 degrees Scorpio fall in your chart? That's the area where you personally may be kind of, mulling over some kind of new intention. But generally speaking, that's what it's about for the collective. Okay, let's go forward one day ahead to Saturday, November 2nd. This is where Mercury actually changes signs, which is so crazy because if we go back just for a moment to Monday, October 28th, Mercury's at 22 degrees Scorpio. And then by the end of the week, Mercury's already leaving Scorpio and entering Sagittarius. So it's traveling very quickly right now. Something unusual that I noticed though, really for much of November, Mercury's not making a whole lot of aspects to any planets, which is very rare, especially considering that Mercury's not yet preparing to go retrograde. It will do so much later in November, but it's not there yet. It's traveling very quickly, so it's uh, very strange. It's extremely strange for it to not really be aspecting a whole lot. But anyway, so with Mercury entering Sagittarius, this is particularly interesting. We've had a lot of detriment planets recently, for a couple reasons. For one, that kind of always tends to happen during fall, since Sun is in fall in Libra and Venus is in detriment in Scorpio. These signs are more kind of like detrimented in nature, I guess you could say. So for one, that's kind of typical for fall. But secondly, though, we've had a decent amount of outer planets in detriment as well, or debilitated. Uranus in fall in Taurus, Jupiter in detriment in Gemini. Mars as well has been in fall in Cancer for some time now. So now that we have Mercury entering Sagittarius, this is another debilitated placement. So I have to talk about kind of my spiel with those. Debilitated placements are objectively more difficult than exalted or domicile ones. We tend to get more exalted placements in spring and summer. Those tend to be the overall objectively easier seasons, I guess you could say. So things get a little more complicated in fall and winter when we get those more detriment kind of energies. It's not all bad though. What I compare it to is, I always say when we have more debilitated placements, we're outside of the box. So not only do we think more outside of the box, we can be very innovative and come up with new solutions. We might be very individualistic with our thinking. We're doing what's right for ourselves, not really caring what everyone else is doing, right? So that can be very advantageous. But at the same time, it can be lonely. We are outside of the box. We're not part of the mainstream. Planets that are debilitated are said to be in exile, sort of. So Mercury in Sagittarius is pretty interesting because Sagittarius is an intellectual sign. It's not necessarily the worst sign for Mercury to be in. Sagittarius is a sign that explores ideas and concepts and loves learning. So you would think that, why would Mercury be in detriment there? Really, the reason why is because Sagittarius is so open. It's not really... Mercury typically likes to be in signs that are more about, I think, refining information a little bit more. And Sagittarius is intellectual, but it's also so passionate. I don't think Sagittarius is anywhere close to being the most discerning sign. I guess that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make. So with Mercury and Sagittarius, rather than being discerning, we're just very open to new ideas, which that in itself is not a bad thing. The point I'm trying to make, whenever, because Mercury has to do with intellect and learning and communication, whenever you have a debilitated Mercury like Sagittarius or Pisces, it means that we're very open to ideas that we might not typically be open to. We might be open to, for instance, many people with Mercury and Sagittarius or Pisces who are born with those placements natally, many of those people are into astrology or other concepts that are kind of against the mainstream. Someone with that placement will be very open-minded and they'll say, even if this idea isn't popular or it's frowned upon, I'll still give it a chance, right? So again, not the worst thing in the world. Having that debilitated Mercury can be great for just, exploring ideas, energies, people that we might not normally be open to. And also, too, I have to mention with, Mercury is joining Venus, and soon, in a couple days, Moon will join Venus and Mercury as well. So we're about to have a lot of Sagittarius placements in general. Let's actually go ahead one more day to Sunday, November 3rd. So this is what I'm talking about. We have suddenly, it was just Venus and Sagittarius, but now suddenly Venus, Moon, and Mercury are all there. Because these are all kind of personal placements, they really have a huge effect on our day-to-day experience. So if you did want to do pretty much anything over the weekend, well, anything like active or kind of social, I would say Sunday would actually be the better day. Saturday looks better for staying at home, organizing, maybe doing errands or something. Sunday looks like the fun day in this case. because Sagittarius, I've actually been thinking about this a lot lately, how I think Sagittarius is the most optimistic sign. It's just really fun energy. Sagittarius loves to get wild and just be very free, just to do whatever. There's not as much, consideration with, like, being super careful or precise. You can kind of just explore and let the chips fall where they may. So it's a really fun energy. Of course, depending on your own astrology, you may have a different experience with it. But it is a fun time. Sagittarius kind of connects to the holiday season, which of course we're not there quite yet, but we're getting, almost energies reminiscent of that type of vibe, with these three major placements in Sagittarius. So I think that looks like a great time. I love a good Sagittarius transit. Really, I love all the fall signs in general, but it looks like a fun time. Looks very warm, kind of a celebratory vibe. Two more things we need to talk about for Sunday. So, quick side note, daylight savings time does end in the United States. That really doesn't have anything to do with astrology, but I figured I'd just let you know. And then also Mars enters Leo. So it's a huge difference. I was already talking about how we have such a, sudden burst of Sagittarius energy. Now with Mars entering Leo late in the day, Eastern Standard Time, which I can say that now again, that now that daylight savings time is over. But now we suddenly have so much fire in the chart. Everything was so heavy and, watery and emotional, even just a couple days ago, even just before this weekend of November 2nd and 3rd. Suddenly things get much more vibrant, much more exciting. You can tell I think fire sign transits are more fun. I honestly think water sign transits are the most objectively difficult. Obviously, if you have a lot of water in your chart, you're used to that energy, so you'll have a great time, earlier in the week with all those watery transits. But I do think it's more difficult. Water signs correspond to ending phases, which I do think are generally more difficult for us as humans, and part of that is the way our society is oriented and our beliefs and all that. Endings are hard for us. We don't want things to end, right? Water signs also have to do with a lot of change, and change can be hard for us. Fire signs are much more exciting and I think easier for us to experience because everything is more immediate with fire signs. You don't have to have a lot of foresight, and fire signs are much more about beginnings and initiation, which, that's a phase that for whatever reason we're more oriented to, that part is more fun for us. So anyway, yeah, I do think the fire signs are more fun and are generally easier. That's not to say they're better, of course, so don't come at me in the comments. Like, each sign, you have to go through the water transit, you have to process everything and integrate if you want to achieve that confidence that comes from the fire energy. It's all about yin and yang. One comes after the other. It's a breath in order to have a breath out, right? So it all kind of, blends together, and there's a purpose for everything. But that being said, some transits are more fun than others. And with Mars entering Leo, part of this too is that Mars will no longer be debilitated. Mars has to do with our passion, our drive. It's the masculine energy, the warrior energy. And that may have been lacking really for a few months now, leading up to this weekend with Mars in Cancer. Mars in Cancer is also confused because, you're fighting from a place of emotion, which can be very valuable, can be, very motivating and very strong. But on the other hand, if you're fighting from a place of emotion is transient, it's constantly changing. If your goals are centered completely around emotion, it may also be very difficult to have clearly attainable goals, you know what I mean, and to follow through with them. So that's why Mars in Cancer is really a kind of confused energy. So this will be much more simplified. I think Mars is much more comfortable and straightforward in Leo. Mars really thrives in all the fire signs, generally speaking. Some more than others, but with Mars and Leo is fixed fire. It's very confident, very straightforward, and Leo tends to have to do with a lot of similar themes to Mars. Leo is so proud and maybe a bit self-serving at times, but also very loyal. So with the warrior energy really, I think fits very well with Leo. So in other words, we may be more proud, more active, more motivated in general. maybe more quick to act, definitely more spontaneous with all these, especially when you put it all together, all the fire transits. We're starting something new. We want to have fun. We don't want to really overthink everything so much. There may be a lot of feeling right now, but it's not nearly as heavy as it was when we had all those water transits. So yeah, depending on your own astrology, you may prefer it one way or the other, but I think generally for all of us, this will be a definitely more lively energy as we end this week here. But yeah, that's what I have for you for this week. So pretty dynamic week. But like I said, I'm excited for those fire transits. I love a good water transit as well, but it's nice that we get kind of a mix. We can go deep into that emotion for, I don't know, the better part of like a week or a week and a half, and then that pretty quickly fades and transitions into this fire phase. So we'll talk more about that next week. We also have another planet changing signs next week. We've got a full moon, and there's a major planet stationing direct as well. So thanks for watching this week. Have a great week, and I'll see you next week.